Tim, welcome to Locked In. Thanks to Patrick and Darren for connecting us.
Grateful to be here, man.
And thank you for the copy of your book right here, man.
Dope to hope.
I appreciate it, man.
You're
When did you write this?
I wrote that in 2016.
Okay.
I got out of prison, when the hell was it? 2013, and just started doing what I do. And yeah, that was one of the things. I had that come out, and then my documentary on A&E, and I wanted people to realize, it was addiction, alcoholism and drugs that brought me to prison. I couldn't stop driving cars and getting DUIs, but there's hope at the end of the tunnel. If you would have met me 11 years ago walking out of prison in the life I have today, you would never thought it in a million friggin' years.
Yeah. So we're in LA right now at Spotify. Shout out to Spotify for letting
Spotify,
them use,
let's rock.
the studio. Did you grow up out here?
No, I actually grew up in the northern suburbs of Illinois. Grew up on a lake there about a half hour south of the Wisconsin border, but it was a beautiful thing because the drinking age was 18 in Wisconsin, and all I did was water ski, drink, and party. But I moved to L.A. almost 6 years ago when I met my current wife now, a lady by the name of Jennifer Jimenez, who's a lady in long-term recovery, but she happens to be a former supermodel and an actress too. And we were speaking and doing interventions. So I shot her a message and said, hey, would you be interested in working together? And 6 weeks later, I flew on a plane to meet her. It was love at first sight. 4 hours later, just as I'm looking at you, I said, Jennifer, I'm going to marry you and spend the rest of my life with you. And she goes, hold on, maybe you want to finish that second divorce? I said, that'll be done in 5 weeks. She goes, maybe you want to sow your oats, play the field? I said, I don't roll that way. I know what I want. And I was divorced 5 weeks later. We got engaged 4 months later and got married December 31st of 2019 to Justice of the Peace in Beverly Hills. So yeah, I live between Beverly Hills and South Palm Beach County, Florida, Lake Worth. And we're actually down there on a concierge treatment program we've been on for 8 months. But I get calls to go do interventions, speaking events, whatever. We get on planes and go.
Who'd you grow up with?
Who'd I grow up with?
Yeah.
Mom and dad. Had mom and dad, obviously. They adopted 4 kids. They couldn't have children, and we had a great life. My dad worked at the Chicago Board of Trade for 26 years, ended up being senior vice president in E.F. Hutton, and my mom co-founded a company called Market Day, which was a food co-op at the schools, and it would help raise money for the schools. That became a multi-billion-dollar company, but we were poor growing up. I had an older brother, 2 years older than me, is just kind of an ass. My little brother and sister, they're 3/4 Chippewa Indian, Native American, so I grew up with a lot of racism, and, I learned to protect them with my mouth and my fist, and, that's where I grew up.
What your parents? What?
Crystal Lake, Illinois.
What did your parents do for work?
My dad was a commodities trader. And I'll tell you that one thing that man taught me about work ethic. In 26 years, he took the train to Chicago. It was about an hour and 20-minute ride. Never missed a day of work.
Wow.
Never called in sick. Never took a sick day. And at the end, he ultimately ran the whole country. He was senior vice president in E.F. Hutton. And in 88, they were merging with Scherson Lehman just when companies were starting to do acquisitions. And they wanted him to fire 1,000 people like a month before Christmas. And he said, are you crazy? These people have worked with me my entire life. So I gave them all a bonus and quit right along with them.
So you guys grew up with some money.
Not really. At first, we were poor. We were latchkey kids. Parents were always working. A vacation was throw the canoe on the van, go up to Wisconsin, camp out, canoe down the Wisconsin River. Then we drive to Colorado, snow skiing. My grandparents lived in Florida. We'd drive there. The one thing about my dad, his dad didn't have him till he was 64. My grandfather's born in 1880. So they went on 2 vacations. My dad always wanted us to be a family. So we always got to go on 2 vacations. In the end, it was Hawaii and some cooler stuff. But family was everything to my mom and dad. I was just the middle kid that struggled with learning disabilities, dyslexia. I got a 1.4 grade average. I took the ACT 5 times. I got an 11. I don't know what a verb, a pronoun, an adjective, a conjunctive sentence is. Throw all that out the window. But I learned life with my street smarts and ultimately business smarts. But I just wanted to water ski. I was a competitive water skier. I went to college on a water ski scholarship, threw that out the window. But I struggled a lot due to my older brother being a narcissist, beating me up every day, the learning disabilities, getting bullied because of that, my little brother and sister being dark-skinned. And then get molested by a babysitter at 10, that kind of screws your world up, and drugs and alcohol started becoming my solution to life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did your parents know that happened to you at the time?
No. It's funny you asked me that. When my Wikipedia page came out, I don't know, 9 years ago, my mom read it, and she calls me crying. And she said, Tim, what are you talking about? You were molested. And I said, well, yeah. And so what happened? I said, you guys went to Paris. I stayed at my buddy Jeff's house. His parents were out of town. They had a female babysitter, and she molested me for 2 days. And I'm like, well, what do I do? Hey, Mom, this happened. I didn't know. I was 10 years old, So she didn't find out until my Wikipedia page came out.
Wow, you never talked about it to anyone?
Never. The crazy thing is I kind of compartmentalized it, and then I forgot about it until I was in prison the second time. And we can get into that, but my cellmate, Big Perk, and I were talking. We're doing 12-step work. I mean, we're in a structured, it was a medium prison, but at a therapeutic community. So I want to be sober. And I was doing my 4th or 5th step, and it just hit me. And it flooded back and I remembered it like yesterday, but I compartmentalized it and kind of just buried it and blocked it out. That's a trauma response to hiding that stuff. And I masked it with drugs and alcohol for years.
Do you think if you had talked to someone when that happened, you wouldn't have went down the path you did?
No, not at all. No, because that was the late 70s. I don't even know if they knew what trauma therapy was back then, but I tooted to my own horn. I like to be outside. I like to fish. I like to hunt. I loved being on the water, whether I was sailing, ice skating in the winter, playing hockey, water skiing. But it was different when I grew up. I graduated high school in 88. So 82, I'm a freshman. My best friend, Randy, was a senior in high school. We're both blonde hair, blue eyes, 6'1". His birthday's 9/18/65. I can tell you his social security number and his birthday to this day because I'd use his ID to go to Wisconsin drinking. So at 14 years old, I'm going to Lake Geneva getting drunk every weekend. At 15, I started doing cocaine. And that was my high school. I was out at 10:30. I got on the work program junior and senior year. I'd go to the pizza shop, flip on the ovens, go home, water ski all afternoon, go open up the shop at 4. But every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, man, it was blow and booze. And I'm 15, 16 years old. And at 17, I went down to college and got into hallucinogenics, and ecstasy was legal in Texas up until 1985. So when I went to Monroe, Louisiana in 86, there was a lot of quantities of pure pharmaceutical grade ecstasy laying around. So we started running drugs between Dallas, Houston, Vicksburg, Mississippi. But back then we could go buy 20,000 hits for 20 grand, $1 a piece.
Wow.
And we'd come back, sell them for 10, 15 bucks. But it gave me the opportunity to do more blow. And I threw that whole water ski career away and everything, scholarship, everything. I studied cardiology and pain.
I'm shocked you were still able to get your high school diploma with that schedule.
Well,
too.
My high school diploma.
Was it a fake?
No, but I mean, out of, 700 students, I was probably 694. I went through the motions, but I didn't learn a thing in school. Nothing. I didn't learn anything. And for me, with my ADHD, I can't sit still and learn for 6 hours a day in a classroom. It just wasn't my cup of tea.
Your parents didn't hold you to a high standard when it came to education?
My parents couldn't hold me to anything. I did what I wanted. It was different. I mean, Christ, I graduated high school. My dad had a case of Heineken waiting for us. Nobody was getting DUIs. We lived on a lake, so you bring the girls, we got the boat, you bring some booze. But they were grateful for me to get a C+, because school was not my forte.
It was a different period of time.
Much different, much different. Damn, that's a good question. If someone would have known, I don't know, because I can remember at probably 15 or 16, one of my older brother's friends I did coke with a few times. He worked for Domino's Pizza, but that was his front because he was really delivering cocaine. And he got popped. And then once he got out of rehab, I remember my parents saying, do we need to worry about Tim? He's like, oh, yeah, I did coke with him all the time. I'm like, thanks for throwing me under the bus. But they tried dragging me to a rehab called The Ark in Hoffman Estates, Illinois. And I remember I talked my way out of it. But fast forward to 1990, when I'm 21 years old, I dropped out of college, came back to Illinois, started hanging out with an older guy, and we'd go to Chicago and buy 2 ounces of coke every day from a Chicago detective because they were stealing all the drugs. and it was good blow too. And we'd sell 1 ounce, and Roger and I had smoked the other one, and it just got out of control. So I looked up a rehab in a phone book, and I called them, and I went and checked myself in.
Wow, I'm shocked you actually were willing to do that.
Well, it's funny. So I called them, and I went and visited, and I had $400 in my pocket. And I guess they were trying to verify my parents' insurance. So I sat in on a group, and I'm like, I don't know about this. So I bolted, and a week later, I went and checked myself in. I started stealing checks from my mom and my brother, and my buddy's gas station. I cashed him at, and he called my mom. And thank you, Rick Modrick. And I mean that, because he called my mom and said, Mrs. Ryan, do you realize Tim's got a drug problem? What are you talking about? Well, he just cashed another one of your market day checks for $500 in my gas station. I guarantee you didn't give it to him. So the cat was out of the bag, and I checked myself into rehab. But I went in with the thought, Ian, that I just want to quit doing coke. I want to figure out how to drink like a normal person. I didn't realize that it all kind of, you get me drinking, I want to do blow and this. But that's where my introduction to recovery started, the 12-step-based program. I made it about a year, started a asphalt seal coating business. Me and my buddy ran a barefoot water ski school, and started competing again. Hell, that summer I won Illinois State, Michigan State, Wisconsin State. And at the Midwest Regionals, I fell and blew out L4, L5, S1. Career's over. Here's 300 Vicodin a month.
So you stayed sober up until that point then?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I was white knuckling it. I'd go to meetings every day, those 12-step meetings, but I never got a sponsor, never worked the steps. And I would go in and out. I would burn stuff down. I go back to the 12-step rooms for 3 to 6 months, shut up the wife, whatever. But it took me 28 years to get back, because then I really started getting consequences. We could sit here and talk for hours about how chaotic my life was. When I had first got sober, I made it about a year, started doing blow, lost everything, so I moved to Austin, Texas with my buddy Trayson to get away from drugs.
And how old are you then?
20.
20, okay. All right, guys, I have officially found the best pair of jeans I have ever worn. And no, I'm not just saying that because they're sponsoring the show today. The Perfect Jean has completely changed the game when it comes to denim. Listen, I used to hate jeans. They were stiff, uncomfortable, and if you've got a little extra in certain areas, let's just say things got crushed. But the Perfect Jean, these things are soft, stretchy, and actually move with you, like yoga pants for men, but they still look sharp. Let's put them to the test. I mean, guys, seriously, look at these jeans right here. They are so comfortable, like literally so comfortable. And growing up, I was always a little bit chubby. I hated wearing jeans, but these are great. No rips, no plumber's crack, just pure comfort. And guess what? They have 6 different fits, sizes from 26 to 50-inch waist and up to 38-inch lengths. No matter what body type you have, there's a Perfect Jean for you. Now, normally I'd spend $150 to $200 on jeans that don't even fit right and I'd have to return them. But these are just $79.99 and worth every penny. For a limited time, our listeners get 15% off their first order plus free shipping at theperfectjean.nyc or Google The Perfect Jean and use code LOCKEDIN15 for 15% off. That's 15% off for new customers at theperfectjean.nyc with promo code LOCKEDIN15. After your purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them that we sent you. F your khakis and get the Perfect Jean. Now let's get back into today's episode.
And I had this plan. I'm going to get sober New Year's Eve. So Christmas is coming up. I'm like, well, I got to get Trayson something. Of course, I had no money. Trayson had good credit. So I take his credit card. I go to Circuit City. I fill out an application. I put him as a co-signer. And I remember the guy. I can remember, the guy's like, where's your friend Trayson? I'm like, oh, I had to go out. He's like, all right, well, you're approved for $1,500. I'm like, great. So I went right and bought a $1,499 video camera. Got on my motorcycle, went to the pawn shop, pawned it for $500, and went and bought Trayson a Harley Davidson custom buck knife, and I went and bought a bunch of crack. Here's my thinking. Gave him that. He was so happy for that. But my thinking is I'm going to get sober. I'm going to get a job. I'm going to get that out of the pawn shop. I'm going to return it, and he's never going to know. I forgot that they send you a bill in the mail. So after New Year's, I started marketing cable television with these guys that were sober. And I remember coming home and Trayson is on his front porch with all my stuff packed, just crying. TR, how could you do this to me? You know, my parents died this. You're my only friend and you screw me over. My uncle stole millions from me, blah, blah, blah. And I got to spend a week in the Travis County Jail. I did a stint in the Ouachita Parish Jail in college for a night, but this was the first time in a county jail, and I was on an all-black deck and got my ass kicked every day just because I was a white guy. I had to sleep next to the shitter on the floor. I can say shitter, can't I?
Of course.
And I got bailed out and I hit the road. I left Texas for 20 years, had an open warrant. Started marketing cable television with these sober guys. A year later, I started my own firm, and I'm in Buffalo, New York. 6 months, I got 60 guys working for me, and I'm profiting 30 to 40 grand a week. I made my first million at 21, 22, but of course, I went back to doing blow. And I can remember Primetime was my dealer. I give him 20 grand a month cash. He'd bring me an ounce of cocaine every day. 7 a.m., he's at my house every morning. I thought he was the next best thing to slice bread. But in reality, I can remember Dan Templeton. He was the manager for Jones Intercable, and they were paying me a lot of money. And he's like, God, you got to be invested in that. Oh, yeah, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I wasn't doing a thing. Coulda, woulda, shoulda, but I wasn't ready. I blew that up. All the families out of work. I buried that business, owed the IRS 80 grand and $250,000 in debt and moved back to Chicago and stumbled into the recruiting business as a headhunter. And then I went to work for a management consulting firm, and I was in that industry for 25 years. But it was a great industry because I could drink, I could shoot heroin, I could do whatever I wanted all day long.
What was it about blow that attracted you to it? Like, were you trying to escape a feeling? Did you like how it made you feel? What was it?
God almighty, I don't know. I had all this underlining insecurities because the only thing I was good at was water skiing. School, everything else I struggled. I didn't struggle with girls or anything, but I had a hard time being in relationships because I didn't know how to treat a woman because I was molested by one at 10 years old. So it kind of screwed things up, and I didn't trust many people, but I just had a total brain fart on your question.
About what it was that attracted
the coke.
you to blow.
I don't know. First time I did it, the first time I did cocaine, you can tell I'm an addict. 15 years old, me and my buddy Pat and Brian were at Jim Spielman's house. He's dead from an overdose, so I can use his name. And Brian's older brother was there. And they go, hey, you guys want to do a line of cocaine? So we each put up $5. We split a quarter gram. We each did one line. I fell in love immediately. We were sleeping at Pat's house. They said, hey, we're going home. I said, I'll meet you guys there in a little bit. And I went up to his brother. I said, do you have any more? He said, yeah, I have a half gram. I'll split it with you. You owe me $25 on Friday. I'm like, done. First time I did cocaine, I'm getting it fronted to me. First time. I fell in love with it immediately, but in the end, it just ravaged your soul. There's nothing good about it. And I'm not one of those people that could go get an 8-ball or a gram or whatever and do a few bumps, go out and go to bed. I don't stop until it's out. And I don't stop drinking and whatever until I got handcuffs on. That's when I stop or I overdose because I went from getting in the management consulting space, meeting my first wife there, got her pregnant 5 months in. I married her. She had a 3-year-old son, Nick, who had a deadbeat dad. I adopted Nick. And then we had Max. And 9 months after Max was born, she's pregnant with Tanner. Tanner's born. 9 months after Tanner's born, she's pregnant with Abby. I mean, boom, 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 good Irish Catholic. Then my wife realizes she's a full-blown alcoholic and drug addict. So long story short, we had a townhouse. I'm working for a management consulting firm. I'm doing blow all the time. And I've been on a 3-day bender. And I wake up and I'm up in our loft and my 14-month-old son's crawling towards my home office. So I pick him up and I go put him back in his room and I open my office door and there's rocks of coke all over the floor. Because I take rocks, just crumble them up. It was disgusting. That scared the hell out of me. I'm like, if my son would have crawled in and put one of those mouth, it would have killed him. So immediately back to those 12-step-based rooms. I get about 14 months sober, kind of get a sponsor, work the steps, built a 5-bedroom house, 3-car garage, started another executive search firm. And things were good, but I met Joel. I met Joel at one of these 12-step-based meetings in Naperville, Illinois. I met 2 people that it was crazy. I'm talking to this one guy, Jim Gallery. Rest in peace, Jim. Jim took his life a few years ago. But Jim and I started hanging out, and he goes, what's your dad do? I said, my dad was senior vice president of E.F. Hutton. He goes, what was his secretary's name? I said, Kathy Gallery. He goes, did you like Kathy? I'm thinking, this guy's a fucking weirdo. I'm like, yeah, Kathy's the shit. Why? He goes, that's my sister.
What a small world.
I said, what? He said, Tim, I'm a bond trader. I've known your dad 30 years. So Jim and I hit it off. Then we meet Joel. So I meet this guy, Joel, heroin addict who OD'd at home. So they took his wife and kids away, and we start hanging out. And I said, what do you do? He said, I work for On Time Courier in Chicago. I said, delivering packages? Randolph Street? He goes, how do you know? I said, I used to do a lot of blow at your office. He goes, what are you talking about? I said, you know Darris? He goes, that hillbilly from Louisiana with the red pickup truck? I said, yep, that's Darris. He goes, how do you know Darris? I said, he was my best friend in college. When I dropped out, I dragged Darris with me, and he worked at the Drake, and he worked for On Time Courier, but they were also running drugs through the city doing that. So Joel and I hit it off, and a couple weeks later, he asked me to help move out of his apartment in Chicago, and I'm moving him out. Now Pop Sava, his roommate. Who are you? I said, I'm Tim. What are you doing here? So I'm helping Joel move out. I said, who are you? He goes, I'm Sava. I go, what are you doing? He goes, heroin. You want to do some? Hell yeah, let's go. Now he's 14 months sober, but I didn't have a foundation. I'm like, what's one bag? I never tried heroin. I'll try that. That was it, man. Game on.
How old are you at that point?
32.
32?
32, wife, 4 kids, and I try 1 bag of heroin. And man, I felt phenomenal. I stayed up, I worked. So I kept calling Sava, bring me 2 more of those, $20, whatever. About 3 weeks later, Sava doesn't show up. And I'm sick as a dog. I didn't know what being dope sick was or anything. And Joel calls and he says, hey man, what's up? I said, dude, I'm sick as a dog. It's 90 degrees. I'm sitting out in the front yard sweating my ass off. He goes, I'll be at your house in 10 minutes. He comes over, he goes, have you been seeing Sava? I said, yeah, why? He goes, buying heroin? I said, yeah, a couple bags here and there. He goes, you haven't seen him in a day or two, have you? I said, no. He goes, Tim, you're dope sick. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, if you don't have opiates, you can shit and puke yourself. So my thinking is, great, I just won't run out of opiates again. So I said, let's go get a bunch more heroin.
And there you get hooked on
And
dope.
it started, and then I met Sava's dealer. And ironically, all these people I'm talking about, Sava died 7 years ago. Joel ended up moving to California at 18 years sober. I know a bunch of the buddies he knew. He moved to Oklahoma. I saw him 7 years ago. I was doing a huge speaking event. He's got some barber shops doing great. And I got a call 4 months ago. He died from a drug overdose. Relapsed. I mean, it's not a winning game. It will ultimately get you. It will ultimately get you.
How does it make you feel when you hear about people that you literally were doing drugs with or getting drugs from or selling drugs to or whatever, passed away?
Well, the first one started when I walked out of prison. So I went to prison in 2008 for driving on revokes. They give you could do 6 months in Cook County jail day for day or take a year in prison, but you're out in 61 days and you're a felon. I said, make me a felon. Let's go. So I get out and I go right back to using. My drug dealer's wife died. I had to go console him. And at this time, I've got I haven't had a driver's license in 15 years. I've got numerous driving on revokes. And I drove one more time, December 16th of 2010, and I overdosed while driving. I hit 2 cars. I put 4 people in the hospital, one being a 9-month-old baby. I could have killed them all, and I was dead on the scene. I had overdosed while driving, and thank God those people were okay. But I tried fighting this in court. I fought it for 21 months, and my dumb lawyer put the paramedic on the stand because they never got blood or urine, so I'm thinking I'm going to beat this. That's how delusional I was. My 3rd aggravated DUI, 5th driving on revoked. They find the spoon and syringe, and I'm going to beat it in my head. That's how grandiose and delusional I was. And I can remember that I put the paramedic on the stand, and my lawyer, he's like, how do you know my client was under the influence of heroin? You didn't get blood or urine. And the guy just sits back. He goes, sir, I've been a paramedic 30 years in Chicago. I've dealt with 20,000 plus overdoses. He goes, your client was dead on the scene, multiple vehicle accident. He said, we administered Narcan once, nothing. Twice, nothing. 3 times, nothing. 4 times, nothing. And the battalion chief said, box him up, this one's gone. And he said, I was going to, and I gave you one more shot of Narcan. And we got a slight pulse, and I mainlined it, and I saved your life. He goes, yeah, it was definitely an overdose. Right there, the judge slams his gavel, 7 years in prison. I'm like, all right, rock and roll.
Wow. But that was probably around the time where they all started carrying Narcan, right? So if it was earlier.
They were just, not even that, because that was 2000 and it was December 16th of 2010. I caught my case and OD'd. So a lot of the paramedics had it, but people in society didn't. You had like the Chicago Recovery Alliance doing it. So I ultimately fought this case. I stayed high the entire time.
You were free on bail?
Free on bail.
Wow. I'm shocked they gave you bail.
So listen to this one.
I used to think I didn't need a VPN. I mean, who would hack me, right? Then one day I was sitting in an airport lounge, logged into free Wi-Fi, and bam, my email got compromised. That's when I got NordVPN, and I haven't looked back since. Now, whether I'm watching sports from a blocked region, booking flights at a discount, or just browsing safely at a coffee shop, NordVPN keeps me covered. The best part? No lag, no buffering, just smooth, fast, and secure internet across all my devices. If you're online without NordVPN, you're rolling the dice, so why take the risk? To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/Ian Bick, where you'll get 4 extra months free on a 2-year plan. And don't worry, there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the podcast episode description. Stay safe, stay connected, and unlock the internet with NordVPN. Now let's get back into today's episode.
So I'm in Cook County. This happened December 16th. So mom won't pick up my calls. My wife won't pick up my calls. 5 days in, I finally get my mom on the phone. And I manipulate her into putting up the bail. I think it was $50,000 or something. And I get out December 23rd. My former wife had been sitting outside of Cook County Jail 10 hours waiting for me to get bailed out because you never know when they're releasing you. We drove home, not a word said. An hour drive, pull into the garage, go in the house. I walk into my home office and Shannon says, your glasses are on the desk and your coat's in the closet. She said, we'll talk in the morning. She turns around, she says, oh, Father of the Year, you do know all the kids' Christmas presents were hidden in the back of the van and they're almost all gone since you totaled it. I'm like, oh, great. I said, we'll talk in the morning. She went upstairs. I got my glasses, put them on, went and opened my coat pocket. There was all the heroin the cops never found because my wife had went to the car and got my glasses and coat, and there was 5 grams heroin. So I went right back shooting dope.
Wow.
That Christmas morning, the kids opened what they had. I hopped a cab to Chicago to buy more heroin. I live to use, I used to live. I love my kids more than anything in the world, but it's hard to love your kids when you can't even love yourself. And drugs and alcohol were everything. But yeah, it was screwed up. But then I got out and I fought it and hired the best lawyer, and it got really dark then because my oldest son, Nick, who was 17 or 18 at the time, the one I adopted, but he was like my own son. I was adopted. So I let Nick smoke weed in the house and drink, and we probably tripped on acid a few times. And everyone knows I'm a heroin addict now. And I'm dope sick once again, about 3 months out of fighting my case, and Nick walks in the bathroom. He said, what's wrong, Pops? So what do you think, you idiot? I'm dope sick. He says, not anymore, Dad. Today's your lucky day. My son threw 2 bags of heroin on the counter. So I got out of the bathtub and I snorted them immediately. And I felt good instantly. And I walk in the next room. I said, Nick, what the hell are you doing? He said, don't worry, Dad. I'm just selling a little bit. I said, Nick, this isn't weed. This is heroin. And you know what this drug has done to me. And my son looks right at me and said, well, Dad, you're a successful drug addict. And I said, why would you say that? Well, he got a nice house. He got an office in the Wrigley building. You make a good living. So in Nick's delusional mind, because I functioned, he thought I was successful. A couple months later, I caught him snorting heroin. So my son and I started using drugs together. That's how Nick and I bonded, doing drug runs to Chicago every fucking day. And unless you've been in that situation, you can't comprehend it and wrap your head around what you were doing. And then October 30th, 2012, I get sentenced to 7 years in prison, and I knew I was going to get taken that day. So I leave my wife. I mean, I was such a piece of shit. 6 weeks prior, I get a commission check for 20 grand. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to spend 5 grand on drugs. I'm going to give her 15. They'll be fine. I spent it all on drugs in 4 weeks. I went to prison, left her with nothing, a house in foreclosure, 4 kids. I weigh 158 pounds. I am skin and bone. I'm 205 pounds right now. I'm 6'1". I was walking death. And I was banging about 5 grams of heroin a day and drinking a gallon of vodka. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be dope sick. So I called my dealer, and I'd never been to his house. I said, dude, I'm in a cab. I'm going to Cook County Jail. I'm going to prison. I need some dope. He's like, meet me at my house. So I get 6 jabs of heroin, like 14 bags each. And I wear a Hell's Angels jacket to court. My Carhartt Hell's Angels biker jacket I wear to court. So I cut a hole in it, and I stab all the heroin bags in there. And of course, I'm jacked as a bird. They sentence me, and they take me in back, and my coat's sitting out there. So I'm telling the CO, I said, dude, you need to get my lawyer. I got it in my coat. He's like, you don't need. I said, it's cold in the bullpens. I said, it's got my phone and wallet. I got to give it to my lawyer to mail home. He's like, all right, give me a minute. Dumbass goes and gets it. So all of a sudden, Dick, I give him my stuff, and they take me in back. And just as I go in that holding cell, bags of heroin start falling on the ground. So I get them all out, and I'm transferring to my sock. The only thing I was worried about is walking through that metal machine. But by this time, I got them all in my sock, never registered. So I stayed high as a kite in there. I don't remember much at Cook County. I was there about 3 days. They give you some meds. Then we get transferred to Northern Illinois Receiving Center, Stateville. And you've been through that process. I mean, the just getting processed 24 hours, up your ass, stand around for 6 hours, doing nothing, taking blood, looking at you like you're going to fix my teeth. They're all rotten anyhow from drugs. Then the sickness starts to kick in. Ian, I shit and puke myself for 2 weeks straight. I didn't sleep a wink for a month. 30 days, no sleep. But about 2 weeks in, I'm on I Hall or something. All you hear is 3 floors, people screaming 24/7. They never let them out because the guy next to you could be a serial killer until they know what of the 28 prisons they're going to ship you to. And I looked out my little window and I said, God, higher power, Allah, Buddha, Fred, whatever's out there, please take away this obsession and compulsion use, and I swear I'll turn my will and life over to you. And I said, please let me get into Sheridan Prison. And the next day at 3 a.m, there was a brown bag in front of my door, and I was off to Sheridan. And then they get you up at about 3:30 and got about 40 guys in the bullpens because you got to see the doctor before they ship you to prison. And I'm the only white guy in here, and all I hear is, on my mama, keep it 100, on my mama. Who is this fucking moron? Quelo. So I got to listen to Quelo. We get on the bus. Who am I shackled next to? Quelo. And to him, it's a badge of honor. He was a pea stone. The guy had been in and out of prison, ripped like a shit brick house. How much time you get? I got a 4-piece. I got an 8-piece. I got a 12. Like, this is a badge. And there's a white guy in the back of the bus, double shackled. And he goes, hey, Whitey, how much did you get? And the guy calmly goes, 40 to life. And he goes, what the hell did you do? He goes, I caught my girlfriend cheating on me, so I cut off her head and her boyfriend's head, and I mailed them to her mom FedEx.
Holy cow.
But I'll never forget getting off that bus. I watched that man. Well, at Stateville, I was watching him because I knew he was a lifer. And go, this guy's done for the rest of his life. He's going to be here. But anyhow, we're on the bus, and we're going to go to Sheridan, and then it goes to East Moline, and we go to get off the bus, and sure as shit, Quelos gets off the bus. And I said, on my mama, don't let this son of a bitch be my cellie. And who do I get? I get Quelo as my cellie. So you're in SEG for 30 days because they got to classify you. And we could get day room 1 night, 1 hour a night. And since it was called Sheridan Correctional Center outside of Chicago, and there's 28 prisons, and they had 2 with therapeutic drug treatment programs. So it's still a medium prison. You're locked down 18 hours a day, but you do group 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, and it was 12-step base oriented and a structure board, and you wanted to be there. And I didn't realize once you get in, for every 4 months you do, they take a month off your sentence. So we go to the day room the first night, and you got to wear these baby blue jump outfits. You look like total dildos. And you had to do this prayer to get off them. And it took me 3 months to memorize that prayer to get out of the dumb monkey suit. But we go to the day room. We come back. And Quaylo's like, hey, Sally, help me get my suit off. I said, dude, I don't roll that way. He goes, fuck you, I'm serious. And I help him pull. And all of a sudden, all these noodles or chili ramen noodles and write-outs and a pat of. So what's going on? He goes, oh, bitch, I'm plugged. He goes, these people take care of me here. He goes, half of this is yours. You're my Sally. It's half yours. I'm like, Quaylo, I like you. Quaylo taught me how to cook a chili ramen noodle on a hot pipe that night. And, we still are friends to this day.
Wow.
But it got better. It got better. You go to orientation hall and you do 30 days. And then you either stay in there in one of the 100-person wings or you get to one of the little buildings and back where you only got about 30 guys on deck. And I got into it. And this is word for word. I walk into my cell and there's this big black dude, 400 pounds, all muscle, sitting on the bunk reading an AA big book. And he's sitting right here. And I walk in the cell door there. And I walk and I kind of look at him. He looks up at me like I bothered him. He goes, hey, Whitey, you into recovery? I said, yeah, why? He said, because if not, brother, you ain't coming in this fucking cell because that's all we do in here. I said, I'm into recovery. He goes, hey, I'm Big Perk. I said, hey, Big Perk, I'm Tim. He looks at me again. He goes, Tim, I think I'm going to call you Powder. I said, you can call me whatever the hell you want. He was a gang chief for 30 years with one of the Vice Lord sects on the west side of Chicago, and he was a ruthless man that spent 23 years of his life behind the wall. And that man's my dearest friend in the world today because Big Perk saved my fucking life. 3 months prior to me walking into that cell, his son Hanson had been killed on the south side of Chicago, west side of Chicago, and Hanson wasn't affiliated. Is at the wrong place at the wrong time. So we're reading hundreds of books. We're doing the 12 steps, karmic healing, cosmic energy, Tony Robbins, Napoleon. I was there to change. And we wrote 2 business plans. One called Hanson, help a negative situation end nonviolently. We wanted to go after the inner city kids tied in the gangs, the guns, and the drugs. And then we wrote another one called a Man in Recovery Foundation. My motto is we take people from dope to hope, helping one addict at a time, because my oldest son, my worst fear, Nick, is going to die while I'm in prison. He OD'd 2 more times. I watched a corn grow, get cut down. Father's Day of 2013, I called Shannon and I said, hey, you coming to visit? She brought 2 of the kids to visit me every 2 weeks. And ultimately, we lost our home. She had to move our kids 20 miles away to her mom's house. My kids had to change schools because I'm the guy that couldn't ask for help. And she said, yeah, I'm going to come visit, but I need to let you know I mailed you a package. I'm like, killer, you sent some magazines, some books? She said, no, I sent you divorce papers. I'm like, all righty then. But you know what? It was the best time to happen because I still had another 6 to 7 months to process that before I was released. And I can remember her bringing my daughter, Abby, who's now 23. Abby was 10, in her cheerleading outfit. And Abby had boobs at the time. And I can remember all the inmates gawking at my daughter. And I'm like, I will never put my kids in this situation again. And then Nick came to visit me once. He was high as a friggin' kite. And so I walked out. Ironically, 3 years to the day I caught my case, I walked out of prison. December 16th of 2013, I was sentenced to 7 years, but I got 3, 3, and 1. 3 for the DUI aggravated, 3 for the 5th drive and revoke, and 1 year for the spoon and syringe. So I only had to do the top number, 3. They whack it in half, 50% I got to do, and then I got some good time for being in the therapeutic community. But that was enough for me. 30 county jails throughout my journey, first stint in prison, and then this one. That was it. I was done.
What happened to the family that you hit? Did they speak at your sentencing?
No, so, it's not funny. So my wife at the time had been with State Farm Insurance for 30 years, 25 years. They never knew I got a DUI. So they covered everything, like a couple $1 million in settlements. Then when my son Nick, he couldn't get his license till he was like 18. When he got his, they realized I had caused this accident and they dropped us like a hot thing, but nothing ever happened. But they settled with the families, and thank God everyone was okay. That, can you imagine killing a kid because I'm screwed up? And it was so surreal, Ian. I can remember my drug dealer's dead. I'm buying from Flacco, his cousin. He's got a kilo of pure heroin. He's like, "Team, be careful, it's strong." So I snort a little, and I bought what I bought, and I pulled into a McDonald's off, I think, Cicero and Grand Avenue in Chicago, and I bang up a big rig of dope. And I put my stuff, and I put it behind the seat, and I sat there for about 2 minutes. I'm like, all right, I'm good. So I started driving. See, I'm the smart drug addict. If I'm OD, I'll OD in the parking lot. And I start driving, and Ian, it was like looking in a kaleidoscope as a kid. I remember that, and boom, next thing, I come to, and I'm being wheeled into West Suburban Hospital that my childhood friend is president of. He's a surgeon. He runs this hospital. And all these little God shots. Without these on, I can't tell who you are sitting across from me. They're wheeling me in, and a nurse is going, "Are you Tim Ryan? Are you Tim Ryan? Are you the water skier from Crystal Lake, Illinois?" I said, "Yes." She said, "I went to high school with you. I'm older than you. You're in a lot of trouble. I think you killed 2 people. You need to get your shit together." See, the cop was telling me I'd killed 2 people. So I'm locked up, freaking out. They said they want blood and urine. I said, "I don't have insurance. Check me out." They took me to the holding police station. The other officer comes in and says, "Hey, man, you need to smoke?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "I need to let you know something. You didn't kill anybody, but my partner doesn't like you people." I said, "What do you mean, you people?" He said, "Well, you junkies, you drug addicts. His brother just died from an OD." I'm like, "Okay, I get it, but the way people looked at addicts and all this, I mean, you think I want to be a professional water skier and a stuntman. I never want to be a drug addict and alcoholic, but I didn't realize trauma and all these things and not talking and nobody knew what to do back then, you know?
You know, a lot of people don't even talk about driving under the influence of drugs. It's always, we hear about the accidents of alcohol. That's a big thing. I was talking to someone the other day where they said you don't even lose your license right away if you get a DUI for drugs. It takes some time, depending on the state.
And man, I was high on, I can remember back in the day smoking weed and driving and having to pull over, forgetting where I'm going. Now, I didn't smoke weed for years. This stuff now is 70 times stronger than what I grew up with.
Well, it's more relevant now than ever because weed is legal in so many states.
That's the problem.
I have friends that will take an edible and they could drive fine, but then there's me. I only take an edible at the end of the night when I'm in bed.
You're on the sofa eating potato chips and ice cream.
I can never drive. I can't drive. I can't even really drive with one drink in me. I'm just a lightweight, but that's I think more people are casually driving high now more than ever, and it's a dangerous thought.
I see it all the time. Where was it here in Florida? I see this. It was in Florida last week. I'm pulling, and there's this guy just chilling, smoking a doob. "Hey, man, what's up?" And I'm like, "Hey," but it's like, man, you can go kill somebody. No, they don't talk about it, and it's a big deal.
I mean, people are casually smoking weed during the day, so you got to be driving at some point, right?
Forget even the weed. How about all the mothers that are on Xanax or Valium or Percocets, and they have their couple cocktails? There's more people intoxicated on the roads, and then these things. These are even worse. The cell phones.
Yeah, but also that's why I have a problem with brunch on a Sunday.
Absolutely.
I don't go to brunch, but I see all these people posting on social media at brunch. I know half of you are not taking Ubers home or walking.
Because that's what we did. I look forward to brunch. I look forward to getting rocked and drinking.
I don't know how people could drink during the day. I can't do it personally.
Oh, man. So at the end of my journey, I would get up at 4:30. I'd drink coffee and vodka. I'd bang some rigs of heroin. I'd get a cab to the train station. It was an hour ride to Chicago. I'd take the express train. And I had a time because the bar at Union Station opened at 9 a.m. I'd have 3 or 4 martinis. I'd call Flacco. He'd meet me at the Wrigley building. I'd get 5 grams of heroin. I'd go up to my office, bang dope. I was at the Billy Goat Tavern. Cheeseburger, no Coke, Pepsi from Saturday Night Live years ago. The original Billy Goat on Lower Michigan Avenue. I'd be there at 10:30 because I thought Jeff, the bartender that worked there for 26 years, was just the coolest dude in the world. I'd sit there till about 2, go to my office. and being a recruiter back then, I could place someone making $100,000 and I got a $25,000 fee. So people like, how'd you make money? I could pull together a fee every month or two if I needed, but all the money ended up going to my lifestyle of addiction. But I'd usually spend 2 to 3 nights a week under Lower Wacker Drive with the homeless people because that's where I was more comfortable instead of being in my 5-bedroom house with my wife and 4 kids because that's where the damn disease of addiction takes you.
Yeah, it's so crazy to think that there are super successful people that battle addiction. I mean, I've interviewed so many people that weren't successful like you were, you know, that are able to make money and they struggle and they commit more crime. And then there's someone like you, you know, you were making great money.
Yeah, and you know the thing, I've made millions of dollars, millions, and I have spent millions on drugs and alcohol, but I never paid myself first. You know, my dad, Tim, 10% invest, pay yours. I never did that. I could have been retired at 25, 35, 45, but I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be right now because that was God's plan for me. But it's funny because I would pawn my own shit because things, I'd have... I had a pawn shop in Chicago. I'd have 12 laptops in there a month. I'd get to the point I'd come in with the laptop case, give it to them. Which one? It's the Apple. Okay, here's $400. It'd be full of newspaper. But it was just, and I'm making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year. It was just total insanity. But
now your parents, after they found out, you know, you were an addict when you went to rehab that first time, why didn't they check up on you throughout like your 20s?
Oh, they did. 20s? I talked to my mom every day. Through addiction, I talked to my mom every day. But it got to the point to where, you know, I got married. I lived an hour away. We'd show up on the weekends, go water skiing, whatever. But I kind of held it together. And it's funny you say that because after the fact, after I got out of prison, so I asked my wife, I said, why didn't you ever tell my parents? Why didn't you do an intervention? Well, but my wife was comfortable with me being an addict in a sense. The house was clean. The bills were paid. I didn't bother. We didn't have to have sex. None of that stuff. I was a Cub Scout pack master. I ran 35 Cub Scout dens for 10 years. I functioned every day. I wasn't this strung out heroin guy till really the end of the journey because it got bad and I didn't care if I lived or died. I mean, overdose. Hell, my last overdose wasn't hitting those cars. I had, this is a crazy story. Don't trust your friends in the drug world. So I was doing dope with this guy, Rich and Missy, his wife, in Aurora, Illinois. And I go to Rich and Missy's. I remember shooting up a rig of dope. Wasn't enough, so I made another. And I shot another. And next thing I remember, I'm waking up in Rush Copley Hospital. My face is beat up. I'm missing 2 teeth, not these two other ones. And I'm asshole naked. And my wife's at the end of the bed. And I'm like, what happened? She's like, Tim, you OD'd. They found you dead on the middle of Hill Street. I'm like, what are you talking about? I was at Rich and Missy's house. I OD'd. And my good friends dragged me down 2 flights of stairs. That's what my face was. And dragged me 2 blocks down the road and left me for dead in the middle of the street. A cop just happened to come by and find me. Yeah, I would have been dead there. So I ripped everything out. Had my wife drive me home to put on some clothes, took the van, went to Rich and Missy's house, beat the shit out of both of them, got the rest of my money, my drugs. I went back home, kept doing drugs. It's just how I operated.
Now, tell us about after prison, you know, your life, what that looked like and bringing up to now.
So here's, you know, prison saved my life. For the people that say don't lock up addicts and this, bullshit. You know, I needed a timeout. God gave me a timeout and sat me down. I got another quick one I can throw at you while I'm in prison.
Yeah, give it to me.
I don't know what your timeline is because I'll talk forever. I'll get this guy on your show too. Okay. So, you know, Ian, in prison, you sign up to get out of your cell for whatever they go. You got a Christian weekend? I'm going. You got this? So it's called, I don't know how you remember this, Freedom of God's Way. And this guy, Manny Mills. Manny was a Cuban. He had been big in the insurance industry, doing some money scams, and gets 35 or 38 years in the federal prison system. He started the first prison ministry and really came to Jesus and Christ in there. And they ended up changing. I think he only ended up doing 6 or 8 years. So Manny was running a prison ministry. And he does this thing, and I feel like the guy's talking to me, and right the last day, an hour, he goes, what's your name and why are you here? So my name's Tim Ryan. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict, and I got my third DUI, blah, blah, blah. And he says, Tim, you got 2 choices. He said, can can actually let God into your life and you can consider changing and put recovery first so you'll have the best life in the world, or keep doing the same bullshit, you'll be lucky to come back here. Chances are you're going to die. So as we're going to leave, he had a book, and it's called Radical Timeout, and he hands me. He says, "You want a copy?" I said, "Sure." As soon as I open it, I see Crystal Lake, Illinois. I said, "Manny, Crystal Lake, Illinois." He goes, "Do you know the town?" I said, "Of course, I grew up there. My grandfather built the first houses on the lake." He said, "I paroled there 28 years ago." And so I went back, read the book, and I wrote him a letter. 4 weeks later, I get a letter in the mail from Quantum Executive Search Firm. I had owned a recruiting firm called Wabo Recruiting prior to going into prison. I knew Quantum Exec. I thought I'm getting sued. I'm like, I must have screwed this guy over. I don't remember. And it's from a guy, Gary. He says, "Hey, Tim, I'm dear friends with Manny Mills. We wrote your inspirational letter. We're willing to pick you up the day you get out, but if not, we run this thing." So I got out of prison. Parole agent took 4 days to show up. Ramsey, pain in the ass. As soon as Ramsey left, I went to the 5 o'clock 12-step base meeting. Then at 7 p.m., I went to Manny's Radical Timeout. And it was a huge dinner, and they do their preaching stuff. But it's for families that have a loved one going to prison, in prison, or coming out of prison. There's a Chicago alderman getting sentenced to 28 years the next day. So they're getting him to be a vessel of, recovery and the scripture going in. But it was just a neat thing that this guy came in and spoke, and the book and all this, and it's crazy. So anyhow, I get out of prison. My former wife and mom found a little townhouse in downtown Naperville, Illinois. All our furniture was moved in because we lost the house. My former wife and kids moved it all in. Shannon picked me up, went and had lunch, took me to the iPhone store. Never had one of those. I had a BlackBerry, and I had to go to my house and wait for Ramsey to show up. My 4 kids, Nick, Max, Tanner, and Abby, came over that night. You ever had Portillo's, Italian beefs and hot dogs?
We used to get them smuggled into the prison camp in Oxford, Wisconsin. That was the
Bingo.
first time.
Oh, so you were in Oxford.
Yeah, I was in Oxford. Yeah, Portillo's. That was a name from the past.
Yeah.
And you put the hot jardinera on
Damn
it. You
straight.
had to have it. And by the time it got to us, soggy, but so
the best.
Good.
I spoke in a county jail in Rushville, Indiana 5 years ago, and I liked the COs, and the head guy said, "Hey, look, this was a great experience. If I send you guys food, will you feed all these?" He said, "There's 200. I said, "I'll send enough for 300, and I shipped them all Portillo's hot dogs and Italian beefs.
Good.
But those are the things you got to do. So I plugged into recovery. I got another sponsor, went to 12-step base meetings, went through the steps again. I needed a job, so I went back into the recruiting business. I hadn't had a license. I had to take a train to Chicago, hour drive, walk to the other train station, take another train an hour to Palatine, Illinois, and take a bus a half hour to work. I commuted 2.5 hours each way to work. But I had to pay, child support and get my life together. That lasted about 3 months. I didn't want to recruit. I had no passion. I had already set up the first Heroin Anonymous meeting in DuPage County. And 2 weeks later, a kid comes in. He says, "Hey, I take Xanax. Can I come to your meeting?" I said, "Sure." 2 weeks after that, a mom comes in with her daughter and says, "Can I sit in on your meeting?" And I had an epiphany. I said, "Why don't I have the parents or loved ones come with the person struggling since it's a family disease?" And this just blew up. I had one in Princeton, Illinois, Dixon, Illinois, Streeter, Illinois. Those were all 100 miles from my house. I did those every week. DeKalb, Illinois, Naperville, Illinois, Crystal Lake, Illinois. We were in 7 of these. I did them every week for 2.5 years. I called my mom. I said, "I want to borrow 15 grand. She said, "For what?" I said, "I'm setting up this nonprofit, a Man in Recovery Foundation. My motto is I take people from dope to hope. Help dope to hope. Help one addict at a time." Looks like dope bone, doesn't it? I'm the dumbass that goes and gets dope hope.
I thought it said dope again. I thought it just
the guy
said dope
uses
and dope.
some goofy, it looks like bone instead of dope hope.
Yeah,
but
that's not an H, bro.
whatever. Thanks. I appreciate it.
You got played on that
I got
one.
played on that one. But so started going. And then at 19 months out of prison, or I'm 19 months sober, 6 months out of prison, my son Nick is in treatment for the 6th time. He's 20. And I visit him, and he's like, "Dad, picture me and you. We used to get high together, speaking in high schools, father and son." I'm like, "Fuck, let's do it, dude. This is my dream." I said, "You got to get a year sober." He said, "I will." 45 days out of treatment, he's back in jail. Does 30 days in Cook County, 30 days in Kane. And then his mom picks him up, took him to feed him, and said, we're done. You're not coming to my house. You're not going to your dad's. All you do is lie, cheat, and steal. I called Nick 5 days later, and I said, Nick, come to my house and get some Narcan. And he says, Dad, I'm not on that BS anymore. Alexis and I are getting an apartment. I'm going to the 12-step-based meetings, and I believed him. 2 days later, 6 a.m, August 1st, 2014, Shannon called me and said, get out of bed. I'll be at your house in 5 minutes. Nick OD'd again. When I went to prison in 2008 and got out, Shannon had got a full ride scholarship to nursing school. I said, you don't need to work. She said, Tim, the way you're living, you're going to end up dead or in prison. I need to get some degree to take care of these kids. So she was going to nursing school. So she picks me up, and I normally don't share this part of the story. I get in her car and I plug my phone into her iPhone charger. Have you ever heard of a band called 6 a.m.?
Maybe, yeah.
Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue started a band, and he wrote a book years ago called The Heroin Diaries. Nikki's in long-term recovery. And he had wrote a book and had a band called 6 a.m., and it was all heroin related. Well, when I plugged it in, the song that came up is called Courtesy Call, and Courtesy Call is about someone being found dead from an overdose in a hotel room. So I immediately unplugged the phone. We shot to the hospital, run into the emergency room. Tim and Shan Ryan here to see our son, Nick. He overdosed, and 30 seconds later, the chaplain walked out. I knew my son was dead instantly. And I'll ask people, what was my next thought? They'll be like, you wanted to get high. No, my next thought was I called my 12-step-based sponsor, and I was surrounded by people in recovery. But I can remember the doctor taking us in back and being the doctor, and did you know your son was struggling? Yeah, we know he's a drug addict. What's going on? He said he didn't make it. And I will never, ever forget that scream that came out of his mother's mouth. And I went with the doctor into the next room, and there was my son laying there, and he's 20, he's beautiful. He's got the aspirator in, cold, 4 hours dead. And I'm like, just... what the fuck? And, for a long time, I said, I hope kill my own son. I led my son down this path, even though I didn't start him on heroin, or he followed in his dad's footsteps. But on the flip side, Nick knew what to do. He'd been to treatment 6 times. He had been sober living. And so I'm dealing with that, dealing with her. His brother came in, and then, we had to leave. So as we're leaving, the cop says, I need to talk to you. So he takes me down the hall, and there's a glass, and I can see 3 people behind the glass. I said, who's that? He said, that's your son's girlfriend and his 2 friends he was with. We're charging them all with drug-induced homicide. I said, excuse me? He said, yeah, they killed him. We're going to charge them with drug-induced homicide. I said, no, you're not. He said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to put them all into treatment. I said, that could have been me getting high with my son. I said, I blame the kids, but I don't because I don't know enough, but I blame the disease of addiction. So anyhow, I helped Alexis and Gary and the other kid, and about a year and a half later, I get a call from Gary's mom. And she says, Tim, we're in Florida. Gary's back using again. He's at our house. Can you get over there? His cousin said he's overdosing. I run into the house, 20-minute drive, and Gary's OD'd, so I hit him with Narcan and call 911. 5 minutes later, they're there. They mainline it, get a pulse, and they're taking him out. And I sat back and looked, and I said, son of a bitch, that's the same sofa my own son died on. And I just helped this kid that let my son die. Because what I found out had happened, Nick went to Gary's house. His parents were out of town with his girlfriend, Alexis, and some other kids. Nick had snorted 2 bags of heroin, and Gary gave him a Xanax bar, and he ate it. Well, when you mix a benzodiazepine with opiates, it suppresses your system. You stop breathing. They knew Nick was overdosing. They didn't call 911. They got the Good Samaritan law. Cops would have come, taken the drugs, saved them. Nobody gets arrested. But nobody's educating the youth about this. They don't know about this law. So they went in the basement, did more drugs, came up an hour later, he was dead. Then they panicked, put his dead body in the car and drove around with it for 2 hours before they went to the hospital. If they would have called 911, chances are he'd been alive. If they had Narcan, chances are he'd been alive. So what I had to take out of that is, how can I take this negative and turn it into a positive? So I educate the schools on these laws, because kids don't know. They're at a party, someone ODs, they freak. Could be alcohol, could be weed, and they freak out. They don't know what to do. So that's one of the things I do now. But my son died on my 21-month sobriety date. And you want to test your foundation, lose your friggin' kid. And I went to a meeting and I never looked back. And today I will be attending my 172nd funeral at 4 o'clock this afternoon. That's just what I do. Another dear buddy of mine, 50, I'd been working with for 2 years and walked out of sober living, took his will back. 2 days later, he's dead. It's just the reality of it. But yeah, that's, I met another, don't screw chicks you meet at AA meetings or 12-step-based meetings. I shouldn't say AA, but whatever.
You're married now.
Well, I'm married now, but I sat next to this gal and she asked me to speak. This is the first meeting out of prison. And she was nice, gave me some attention, some validation, which I needed. You know, I haven't been with a woman in a year and a half, but she was married. Well, next thing she starts kind of visiting me and, oh, my husband, I got to leave him. She shows up at my house with her kids. And next thing I'm stuck with her. About 6 months in, I said, man, I can't do this anymore. You drive me, you're crazy as a loon. She says, I'm pregnant. You got to be shitting me. So I thought you're on the pill. Well, I am. And she baited me. So I kept her ass around. And then I get this beautiful gift called Mackenzie. I've got a
Fourth kid?
Fifth kid.
Fifth kid.
So Nick, Max, Tanner, Abby, and now Mackenzie. And Mackenzie at 4 months old, her mom pulls some fake suicide attempt, drinks rubbing alcohol. So she goes into the psych ward. I fly my mom up from Florida. I get her out of the psych ward. I fly Mackenzie's mom to a high-end mental health treatment center in Florida. I need a fucking nanny. Who's my nanny, Ian? Who'd I have be my nanny?
Her?
Damn straight, Big Perk. Big fucking Perk. And I started doing work with the police because I started speaking with this cop that was a cyber crimes expert and a SWAT sniper, and we ran a program called The Cop and the Convict. And Rich would educate on, you want to know what your kids are doing, get into their technology, and I'd share my story. So I called Perk up. I'm like, dude, I need this. He's like, dude, I'm there. Came over, lived at my house, took care of my little daughter. But I started getting these cops going, why are you having this gang chief ex-con? I said, you got to understand, I lived with this man for 13 months in a cell. I trust him more than anybody in the world. I said, until you do that, you're not going to understand what I'm talking about. So yeah, Big Perk was my nanny. my Manny, we called him. And
that is too funny.
Then she comes back, and 2 days later, fake orders of protection. I kept this knucklehead around, and it was hell on earth. And we finally, well, I got her sober. Thought I did about a year, and I had it all set up because she relapsed 3 weeks after I married her ass. And I'm doing a huge speaking event with Elvis Presley's half-brother and the founder of the Make-A-Wish Foundation at Soldiers Field, and I'm getting calls that she's messed up at home. So I got to go back. She drank a bunch of Robitussin. I said, here's your sponsors, your therapist, here's your psychiatrist. One mess up, you're gone. But my plan in my head was when she's a year sober, I'm divorcing her. And I had set that up, told her I wanted a divorce, and then Jennifer Benone stumbled into my life. Ian, I wasn't looking for a relationship. Last thing I wanted, but when you see Jenny's discovered at 13 on the Santa Monica Pier, supermodel overnight, music videos with Prince, Lionel Richie, Babyface, Mick Jagger, Tupac Shakur, the All About You video, she's in all Tupac's books and then all her movies. But she was sober and legit, and I didn't think I thought she's way out of my league, and man, it was game on, and been with her almost 6 years now, and now we travel the country, we speak, we do interventions, I just filmed a movie last year with DeAndre Bonds from Snowfall, and she still acts, and I wrote a book, and I had a documentary in my life called Dope Man on A&E, and a guest of the State of the Union. I've been on every news show you can think of. I give a shit about any of that. What I care about is platforms like this to where I can carry a message and let anyone know out there, hey, bitches, R68915 is fucking retired. I will never put that number back into use. I promise you. I will never pick up a drug or a drink again. But I have to take all my years of pain, trials, and tribulations. It was said to me 2 weeks after my son died, his mother. We were having lunch, and she said, Tim, you got to understand something. She said, I've been thinking a lot about you and Nick and him dying. She said, I truly believe God put Nick and I in your life for a reason. And had you go through your struggles, had Nick go through his, for Nick to pass on to set the stage for what you're going to do next. She said, your 28, 30 years of active addiction have been your training ground to go help people. And that's what I do now. We were just speaking in the Sheridan prison 2 months ago for 2-3 days to 1,500 inmates, 200 at a time. My wife, a buddy of mine, Jay, his sponsor. That's what it's all about. And there was 4 guys on death row there. They didn't have death row. They shut death row down in Illinois. So these 4 guys got transferred to Sheridan. One of the guys had been on death row 48 years. And these guys all now have masters and MBAs, and they teach all the substance abuse certifications for Sheridan's substance abuse program. And the one guy who was crazy, Sheridan had this crazy guard, jacked up. What's his name? I'll send you his Instagram. The guy's in left field, but he's got like 500,000 followers. So he's drinking beer and working out. But Jen went up and touched this old guy, and the CO got up, and Jay's like, hey, Jen, back away, back away. Well, he had killed 4 women. My wife was the first woman he had touched in 38 years. So after we did our speaking event and everything, she went up and gave him the biggest hug and a kiss on the cheek. But it's just that connection.
Those moments. I love speaking in prisons and having those moments.
It's the greatest. I'll tell you, when we were speaking in Sheridan, I'm talking about my former dealer, Ray Rollon. And Ray was rest in peace, Ray, boss maniac. He was third highest up with the Maniac Latin Disciples street gang in Chicago. Ruthless gang. Of course, I was the only white guy allowed in the neighborhood, the house. I remember I was popped off once for a driving on revoke in Chicago. And the guy, and I got a T-shirt on, it's cold, and the guy's like, hey, you're Boss Maniac's white buddy, aren't you? I'm like, yeah. He's like, here's a hoodie, here's sweatpants. We got you taken care of while you're in here. But I was sharing about Ray in the prison, and, he passed on and all this. And this big son of a bitch stands up. He goes, Tim, I know you. I go, what are you talking about? He goes, I was about 150 pounds lighter when I knew you. He goes, I was Boss Maniac's enforcer. I've met you over 100 times. Like, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, you can't make it up. One of the guys I was in prison with, we called each other by last names because it was respect, Mr. Norris, Mr. Mr. Norris was ahead with the GDs. And we got out, and West Care, which runs the therapeutic community in the prisons, some inmate that got out years ago ran a radio show in Hammond, Indiana, Shithole, USA. So I said, hey, Brad, let's go do this radio show. We pull in, get in, come in like walking in your studio here. And the host, like you, Ian, the guy sees my buddy Brad. He goes, $1 bill. $1 bill. They were in prison 25 years ago. The radio host was a first timer. And my buddy Brad protected him and saved his butt while he's behind them, because they were in Menard then, a max, and helped save the guy. And the guy got out and got sober and turned. But the chances of us going to do this and these two see each other and Brad's now sober, you can't make this stuff up.
It's incredible.
It's incredible. And I'll tell you what, I hate ex-cons and all that, but
I'm an ex-con.
Some of my dearest friends I met behind the wall. Black, my buddy in Chicago, he's got friggin' 38 kids. I'd call him now.
38?
38 with 2 women. 38 kids.
It's crazy.
I met another guy with 24. Yeah, it's nuts. But I could call these guys, say I need you on a plane immediately. They won't even ask why they're coming. They'll just come. And it's a loyalty, and it's a bond, and it's a respect that you don't get. I get it in the rooms of a 12-step base room, but that camaraderie I have with ex-con, and I can talk to them anywhere, because I can wear a suit, I can be tatted out, I can be whatever, but when I walk in and say, hey, I'm Tim Ryan, grateful recovery alcoholic and drug addict, I also go by R68915, and it's retired, I got their attention immediately. And to be able to go give those men hope, that's what it's all about. If I could just go speak in prisons and schools the rest of my life, that's all I do. let people know that, but I'm real talk. I'll tell you the fucking realities. I didn't really have much fun. I had some fun for a while, but that went away. And it's a lot of work being a drug addict and a liar and a cheat and a thief and a con and blah, 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 blah. But
yeah. Well, Tim, I appreciate you coming on the show today,
I appreciate you coming. Let me come on.
You're a great storyteller, man. So much energy, you know.
We could tell stories. we could just have a storyteller series.
Yeah.
And I mean,
well, you got to get a podcast rolling, man.
I had one and then I
get that thing back going.
I'm telling you, I'm like, well, I don't want to give you competition.
Me competition. I'm in my own lane, man.
You're doing great.
Yeah.
And Ian, I got to commend you, man. You came out of nowhere with this and you're doing a hell of a deal. And I got a lot of people, some crazy stories Benny Lee. Do you know who Benny Lee is?
Sounds familiar.
I'll get you dialed in with Benny. We did TED Talks together. Benny was one of the founders of the Vice Lords.
Oh, wow.
In Chicago. Ended up going to prison. He was in a max, and they had a big fight on the yard. A bunch of guys got killed. Well, him being the chief, he got put on death row. He spent a number of years on death row, and he ultimately got released, and he runs Inner Circle in Chicago, and his whole life is about giving back and all that. So
send them my way, man.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you, brother.
I appreciate you.
Safe
Thank you, my
travels
man.
back. Yep.
Peace.